Hi guys, I was not going to do another video today, but when I was uploading my recent video about the new flu vaccine study that came out from the Cleveland Clinic, sometimes when I put things onto YouTube, I'll go into ChatGPT and have them summarize my video because it helps with just, using the right keywords and getting the right audience, that kind of thing. And I have to read this to you. I was literally laughing and I screenshotted this because I don't have an account with ChatGPT, but I screenshotted this because I cannot. This is literally bias and propaganda at its finest. Again, I know I've done a video on this, but this was just egregious. All right, so I said for ChatGPT, I said summarize the new study in preprint about Cleveland Clinic employees vaccinated for flu virus compared to unvaccinated. I didn't say what side I was on. I was just saying summarize the study. I didn't even say anything about YouTube yet. And it says, and I quote, a recent preprint study evaluated the effectiveness of the influenza vaccine among Cleveland Clinic employees during the 2024-2025 respiratory viral season. The study included 53,321 employees, with 82.1% of the individuals receiving the influenza vaccine by the end of the study period. Over the 17-week study, 324 employees contracted the flu. Using Cox proportional hazards regression adjusted for age, sex, job type, employment location, and eagerness to get vaccinated, the study found no significant difference in influenza risk between vaccinated and unvaccinated employees. Well, that's news to me because the study showed an increased risk of flu in those who were vaccinated. It goes on to say that the hazard ratio was 1.10, which means that it increased the risk, but only 10%. But the hazard ratio in the study was not 1.10, it was 1.27. And then it says the 95% confidence interval was 0.77 to 1.57 with a p-value of 0.59, which means it's not statistically significant, corresponding to a vaccine effectiveness of negative 10%. These findings suggest that within this specific cohort during the 2024-2025 season, the influenza vaccine did not significantly reduce the risk of influenza infection. It's important to note that this study's results may not be generalizable to the broader population, and further research is needed to fully assess vaccine effectiveness. Now, I have to be honest, I did not read that before I typed the next thing. I said, make it YouTube friendly and SEO keywords, because I forgot to mention I'm doing this for YouTube. And it said, sure, here's a YouTube friendly blurb. And so it does this very nice thing, and it takes that same information and it says, a new preprint study from Cleveland Clinic is raising questions about flu vaccine effectiveness during the 2024-25 flu season. Researchers tracked over 53,000 healthcare workers and found no significant difference in flu infection rates between those who got the flu shot and those who didn't. It even has a emoji. So it said that there was no difference, but there was. So then I pushed back and I said, wait, there was no difference? I thought there was a statistically significant increased risk of flu in vaccinated. Hazards ratio was 1.27. And it says, apologies for any confusion in my earlier response. Upon reviewing the study more thoroughly, the reported hazards ratio for influenza risk among vaccinated employees varied slightly across different analyses. The study found hazards ratio of 1.17 with a 95% confidence interval of 0.86 to 1.59 with a p-value of 0.31 without adjustments for eagerness to get vaccinated, and a 1.09 with a confidence interval of 0.76 to 1.55 with a p-value of 0.65 when adjusted for risk factors including age, sex, job type, employment location, and vaccination eagerness. These hazards ratios suggest a slightly higher risk of influenza among vaccinated employees. However, the confidence intervals include 1, indicating that these findings are not statistically significant. Therefore, the study concluded that the influenza vaccine did not provide significant protection against influenza during that season. And I said, are we looking at the same study? These are the confidence intervals reported in the study. And I put in quotations and I copied and pasted from the trial into ChatGPT. In an analysis 35 adjusted for age, sex, clinical nursing job, and employment location, the risk of influenza was significantly higher for the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated state. The hazards ratio was 1.27 with a 95% confidence interval of 1.07 to 1.51 with a p-value of 0.007, yielding a calculated vaccine effectiveness of negative 26.9%, with that confidence interval being negative 55 to negative 6.6%, which means it did not cross one and they were statistically significant. And ChatGPT says, "You're absolutely right. And I apologize for any earlier confusion. Upon reviewing the study titled Interim Effectiveness of the Influenza Vaccine for the 2024-2025 respiratory viral season from the Cleveland Clinic, the researchers reported a hazard ratio of 1.27 with a 95% confidence interval of 1.07 to 1.51 with a p-value of 0.007 in their multivariable analysis adjusted for age, sex, job type, employment location, and eagerness to get vaccinated. This hazard ratio indicates that vaccinated employees had a 27% higher risk of contracting influenza compared to unvaccinated employees during the study period. The calculated vaccine effectiveness was negative 26.9% with a statistically significant confidence interval, suggesting that the vaccine may have been associated with an increased risk of influenza infection in this cohort. These findings are notably different from the initial analysis, which reported a hazards ratio closer to 1, not including 1 like it originally said, but closer to 1, indicating no significant difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated groups. The discrepancy likely arises from differences in statistical modeling and adjustments for confounding variables. In summary, the study suggests that within this specific cohort of Cleveland Clinic employees, mind you, 53,000 people is pretty generalizable, the influenza vaccine may not have provided protective benefits and could have been associated with a higher risk of influenza infection. However, it's important to note that these findings are specific to this population and may not be generalizable to the broader public. The end. That was my interaction with ChatGPT. I put in a study and it gave me false data to fit its agenda, the pro-vaccine agenda. You don't want to have a study that shows that the vaccine is worse than not being vaccinated. So at first it gave me false data, and then it tried to keep giving me false data by twisting the data. And then when I literally gave it the data, it was like, oh, sorry, it may have increased the risk of flu, but it's not generalizable. But it is, you guys. It's not generalizable to kids. It's not generalizable to elderly, but it is generalizable to 53,000 employees, people who work aged 18 to 68 or whatever people are working to. It is generalizable. That's the bias we're working up against. And I had to post this. I had to post the bias in ChatGPT and all of these different social media things that we're using. Thank you for listening and stay healthy.